In this unit, we're going to go over basic terms for geometry to get us started. So by the end of class, you'll be able to accurately define and identify basic geometric shapes. You need to know it because these definitions will help us in places such as proofs where you'll connect concepts and express them in a clear way. And you know you can do it when you can demonstrate either orally or in written form the precise definitions of angle, line segment, based on the idea of points, line, and distance along a line. So first of all, this class, geometry, it comes from the Greek words for measurement and earth, because that's what it was. Geometry was all kind of discovered or made up to measure the world, measure the earth around them, back in ancient Greece, like BC times. So they studied size, shape, and position of 2D and 3D figures. Had a lot to do with like constructions, things like that they were building. So measuring land, Euclid is one of the early Greek geometers. So he actually gets credited for a lot of stuff. So, most of what geometry is actually, it's a lot of vocabulary. It's almost like a foreign language, there's so much vocabulary. So that's why we've got the vocabulary sections in your notebooks and all of that. Our first term, though, is a point. And it's a specific location with no size. We just represent it with a little dot and a capital letter. Draw the dot to represent the point, and we name it with a capital letter. So you just name it with P, like any capital letter, whatever one's used. A line is a straight path that extends infinitely in opposite directions. It has no thickness. So if you have 2 points, A and B, you can connect them with a straight line. And if it extends infinitely in both directions, that's why we put these arrows on it, that's a line. So you can name it AB using those 2 letters, and you put a little line symbol above it with the arrows on it, because it has arrows. Or you could actually do that in the other direction too. It doesn't matter if you say AB or BA. And sometimes there's even another option when they give you a little script letter like that, kind of like a cursive letter. You can just use that one letter to name the line if it's already there. So that's kind of a third option there. Next, we have a plane, which is just a flat surface that extends infinitely. When they draw it out, they usually draw this shape, kind of like a parallelogram. And when you name it based off of that capital letter that they put there. It's not actually a point or anything like that. There's no dot there to show that that's a point. That's why it's just the name of the plane. Sometimes you might even see they draw it out with like a little parallelogram and then the letter. Sometimes. Then we've got undefined terms. All these three things we just talked about: points, lines, and planes. They're technically undefined terms. We described them, but they don't have definitions based off of anything else. Now we can use those things, lines and planes and points. Now we can define some other stuff. Space. That's all the points. Space is all the points, like the entire universe, basically. Collinear, the word co just means with, like joint, together. Like co-captains means two captains together, they're both captains. Collinear means 2 points are on the same line, they're together on the same line. So co-linear means line. So here we have one line with 3 letters, LHS. They're all on that same line, so they are collinear. And next to it, we have these 3 points. They actually form like a triangle if you connected them all. That's not collinear. It's not one line, it's a triangle. So co means together. Coplanar means together in the same plane. So here we've got 3 points that are all in the same plane. You can see the little parallelogram plane representation drawn out. But non-coplanar, you can see there's 2 planes. I like to think of it kind of like if you pick a point or a dot on the ceiling and another point or a dot on the wall. You've got the plane of the ceiling and the plane of the wall. Those are not coplanar. So you have the plane of the ceiling and the plane of the wall. 2 different planes. Intersection is all the points shared by figures. It's where they cross. It's the points that they share. So these 2 lines, they intersect at point X. That's the only point that's in both of them. It's the point that they share. These 2 planes, they intersect at all of these points. So they intersect at a line. That's the intersection. So the word congruent, first of all, this is the congruent symbol. It's like an equals with a little squiggle on top of it. That means congruent. And it's when one figure can become another by moving onto it. Therefore, the two figures are the same size and same shape and same size. So here's two triangles. You can show that they are congruent because you can move them onto each other. So they're the exact same size, the exact same shape. You can move them onto each other. They're congruent. A segment is a portion or a part of a line with two endpoints and all the points between them. So the main difference between a segment and a line is that the segment stops. The segment does not keep going after these endpoints. Lines keep going and they have the arrows. So it's pretty similar when you name it. You could use A and B, but then this time you draw a line on top with no arrows. And then just like a line, it would be okay if you switch that order around too and you did BA instead. That's fine. But you know it's a segment because it does not have the arrows on it. A ray is kind of like half of a line because it has one arrow. It's got one endpoint and all the points on one side. So it's got one endpoint and one arrow. So again, it's kind of similar to how we named segments and lines. We can use those 2 points there, A and B. And the symbol is an arrow pointing in one direction. It always has to point to the right. This symbol always points to the right. And the other thing that has to happen, because you cannot swap this around. Because the arrow, if you look at the actual figure, the arrow is over there at B. So the arrow, when you wrote the name, has to be over there at B. You cannot do it the other way. This is wrong. Because the arrow has to be at B, because that's where the arrow is pointing in the picture. And the end point is at A, and A is at the end point when you name it. Parallel lines are lines in the same plane that never intersect. Most people would say that never intersect. A lot of people would not say that they're in the same plane, but we'll talk about that in a moment. They never intersect. So here's two lines. We have line M and line P. And to say that they are parallel, you can say line M and line P, and then we're going to put the symbol for parallel in between, which is just two vertical lines, parallel lines. M is parallel to P. Now, another thing about this, these little arrows in the middle of the lines, that right there tells you that they're parallel. That's a symbol in the drawing for parallel. That's important. And perpendicular lines, they intersect at right angles or 90-degree angles. We've got our two lines, line A and line D. To say that they are perpendicular, we do the perpendicular symbol, which is like an upside down T. But they form right angles, that's why we got this little right angle marking right there. All right, so real quick, parallel lines talks about lines that are in the same plane that never intersect. So part of that is because really what happened was somebody was there, everyone knew what parallel lines were, and then somebody came up with the idea and they were like, well, what if we look at where the wall intersects the ceiling? That's a line up there. But then we go down to where a different wall intersects the floor. That's another line. They don't touch each other. They don't intersect. There's a line at the ceiling and the wall, and there's a different wall with the floor. Those lines don't intersect, but they're definitely not parallel because everyone can see, we know what parallel is. That's not it. So they gave that the name skew. They do not intersect, but they are not parallel. They do not intersect, but are not parallel. And really the only way to kind of draw that out is if you draw a box, a 3D box. So when you have the 3D box drawn out, you can see some lines here that are skew. We can take this line A, which would be like the ceiling and the wall, like I was talking about. Then if we pick a different wall and the floor, so a different wall, so this wall over here and the floor, that'll be like line C. They're not parallel, but they don't intersect. Or we can do the same thing with A and B. Those are skew as well. So there's a whole lot of options there. They don't intersect, but they're also not parallel. There's not any symbol that we're going to use for skew lines. Just write out the word. It's a short word. An angle is formed by two rays with the same endpoint. Two rays with the same endpoint. Two rays with the same endpoint. So here's our two rays. They both intersect here at B. Two rays. So that endpoint is actually called a vertex, that B point right there. We don't need to know that quite yet. But when you're naming this, it's best to name it with three letters. I have a note down here even. When they give you 3 points, we're going to use all 3 points to name it. So when we do that, this B, that endpoint, that common endpoint, that has to go in the middle. So we can start with A. B has to be in the middle, and then the other point is C. So that's angle ABC. As long as B is in the middle, you're naming it correctly. So that means we can also start with C, B's in the middle, and A. If you follow the order that you wrote it, if you traced it, you draw the angle. If you go in order that you wrote it, you drew the angle out. It would not work if you said CAB, because then you're going like this. That's not the angle. You didn't trace the angle. If there was only one letter there, if the letter B was the only letter that was there, you could say angle B. That's okay. Or if they number it like they did here, you can also use that number to name it. So there's a lot of different ways. So we've got some different names for angles. Acute. Acute always makes me think of something small, like a cute puppy is a small dog. So the word cute just makes you think small. So acute means it's a small angle. It's less than 90. And then there's right angles. Probably knew that one already. A 90-degree angle. And the word obtuse kind of reminds me of the word obese. It's just big. Big angle, greater than 90 degrees. Obtuse. Greater than 90, but less than 180. A straight angle makes a straight line. That's where the word straight is in there. Straight line. So that's exactly 180 degrees. Makes a straight line. This last one, it's more rare. Usually it's not. Normally we don't look at the reflex angle. Reflex angle, normally if you see this angle, you would just look at it and go the short way. That's the angle that you would think about. If it talks about the reflex angle, that means we're looking the other way, the greater than 180 degrees, because it's kind of weird to look at it that way.